grammar fans, welcome back to another video in the #GrammarFans series. Today we're talking about one of the most important concepts to effective writing, which is the grammatical concept of the subordinate clause. A bit of background first before we get into some details and examples and talking about why subordinate clauses are so important. First of all, definition of clauses. A clause is a structure in language that contains a subject and verb. In the English language, we have independent clauses and then we have dependent clauses. Independent clauses are those that can stand on their own as a sentence. Dependent clauses can't. There are a number of different kinds of dependent clauses, many of which we will address in these Grammar Fans video series. But the one we're working on today is one of my favorite, the subordinate clause. So a subordinate clause is a kind of dependent clause. It's a structure in language that contains a subject and a verb. It can't stand on its own as a sentence, and it begins with something called a subordinating conjunction. The most frequently used subordinating conjunctions are the words if, since, although, because, and until. When you use a subordinate clause, what you do is use that clause in connection to an independent clause, and by combining the two, you provide some background or some descriptive detail for the independent clause in the sentence. Usually the subordinate clause gives you information about why something's happening or helps us understand that event in a lot more specific detail. For example, going back to our grammatical concept last week of talking about strong verbs, and we did so with making connections to the Pittsburgh Penguins Stanley Cup Championship, if we had the independent clause, the city of Pittsburgh held a parade. Well, that sentence is fine, it makes sense, but if we added the subordinate clause, because the Penguins won the Stanley Cup, the city of Pittsburgh had a parade. That subordinate clause, because the Penguins won the Stanley Cup, gives us important background information and important detail. One of my favorite examples of a subordinate clause is featured in Kelly Clarkson's popular song, "Since You've Been Gone." And in this song, Clarkson uses that subordinate clause, "since you've been gone," to provide background information to help readers understand